Basically, the idea was just we wanted everything off kilter.
Shooting a movie normally, photographically, is completely uninteresting to us.
I really like that it's detached enough from my world and my life, because it's an alternate reality of sorts, that not only me but the audience feel like they can really enter into it with her.
It feels like it's a heightened world, so then I think you're allowed certain freedoms because of that.
Creating this world, it wasn't the world that we currently live in. It was it's as if 20 years ago we went in a different direction. So where we are now, we went right, and then they went left.
You know, it's near future, but a lot of the production design is very vintagey. So there's this weird blend of modern technology that would be in the near future, and a lot of retro stuff. But it's not just for fun. Like, Brandon has kind of thought all of this through.
Basically, the film is set in kind of an alternate 2008. That was my way of trying to make it not the future, because that kind of technology, the body possession technology, wouldn't really exist in a world that's similar to our own. And then to create a film that was a kind of predictive sci-fi, you'd really have to have a future world, which I didn't want to do, and was also sort of beyond the scope of the film.
I like that Brandon is his sort of alternate reality aesthetic, or his futuristic aesthetic, or whatever you would call that. His aesthetic is very pared down. That's one of the things I really like about it, that it's really pedestrian. You can imagine it being in our world, and it just looks a little different.
The film is full of weird little touches that aren't really about our 2008. They're just about making it familiar but slightly different. Everyone vapes excessively in the film, and their vapes are covered in stickers. That was just some idea I had. I was looking at Japanese pain bags, these kind of anime fan bags that people have, where they stick a ton of buttons and things based on their favorite anime character. It's sort of to show their fandom, and I kind of like the idea of just like this sort of weird cartoony clutter of things on something that somebody uses in a day-to-day way. One of the things I wanted for this sort of alternate 2008 was to have large wall screens instead of TVs. Originally, we were looking at maybe like LED panels, and it didn't end up being practical.
The wall screens, when we found out how much they were, it was just crazy money. And so a happy accident was that they had to become projection.
Some front projection and some rear projection on sets that we built.
At Rena's apartment, we built this massive telly, which everybody liked. It's as if it's a CRT TV. It's just enormous, and it's got a great box on the back, and so it pushes you a little bit, and you come up with other ideas.
Old cars, that was something that wasn't in the script, but when we started looking at actual cars, it became really interesting. Originally, the idea was just that Zoo Through was going to have these old cars that were converted to electric, but then we found these amazing cars at the car rental place, and it seemed like it would be more interesting to go all the way and have cars in that world be old. I forget at what point in the process we thought it would be interesting to have the Zoo Through cars be in some way unified, so we tried to look at car models, old car models, colors, and we found this particular blue that a bunch of old cars seemed to have been painted at the rental place. And so we thought, okay, this is interesting. The Zoo Through cars are all blue, and then we'll make that blue the blue of the company. So we kind of worked backwards, and the logo is that blue, and they wear shirts that are that color.
It's a mixture of styles. It's a mashup is something that was always talked about. So just going for anything a little off. That was down to locations as well. If it's a back alley, then it's just not the normal back alley, and it's not the normal angles. It's just things that aren't quite right together. One of the other locations there was this work room. It's the data mine. So we found this shitty corner, and we built some shitty benches, and props put together these great sort of headsets.
John Pass's house is kind of otherworldly in this really strange way. I mean, it's so kind of decadent and elaborate.
The mansion is incredible. I couldn't believe it when we got there.
In the script, it was a very modern house, big windows, and newly built and sleek, and so that's what we were looking for. And then it was the location manager who came up with this particular mansion, and he showed us these pictures of this crazy interior, the gold and completely over the top. And we all thought, yeah, this is great for that character.
And it's interesting because it, in a way, is like a film set. Like, it's obviously a very expensive mansion and a lot of that stuff is real, but there are weird touches to it. Like, the marble on the floor is real, but some of the marble pillars are actually wood that is painted like marble. And there's that whole kind of like Sistine Chapel dome thing that you can then go upstairs and see the top of, because it's sort of built within the house.
You know, it was an art department's dream.
There's barely any visual effects at all. Everything is kind of in camera.
That's one of the exciting things about Possessor. It's very organic. It's a very practical, you are there kind of movie. So photographically, it was a lot of challenges. We levitated little pieces of styrofoam using sound. So normally what people would do is they'd go, oh, we'll just do some CGI and we'll superimpose a thing and you'll grab it. But we did it all practical. That's live. We also froze water with sound in the movie, which is another rather radical thing. That's at the beginning of the movie in the hotel. What you do is you take a subwoofer and you throw 24 hertz sound against a tube where the water is running through. So the water, the liquid itself, takes the vibration of the sound, and then you synchronize that to the speed of the camera you're working, and then tighten the shutter angle substantially to create the illusion of the water either going upwards or frozen. You know, that technique you'll primarily find in YouTube experiments or science videos or whatever, but no one has done that in a mainstream movie. And we found out that because no one has done it in a mainstream movie before, on film sets these days everything is done wirelessly. The video signals are transmitted wirelessly, sound in many situations is done wirelessly, and ultimately when you throttle 24 hertz of sound into the air to create the illusion in camera of water being frozen, it actually disrupts wireless signals. So the focus puller wasn't able to focus because we weren't able to get a signal going through, so we had to old school hardwire everything. And only the morning afterwards I was like, oh yeah, of course, eureka. So things like that were really fun, and we were only able to do that through years of experimentation.
I think doing so much of the effects stuff live on set, that's really cool because you get to be a part of it and you get to really feel what's going to end up being in the final film. So, you know, the projection stuff and a lot of the light work and, you know, the way I think some of the stunts are choreographed, it feels very much like we are doing what will end up on the screen, which isn't always the case when you have lots of special effects and you're sort of doing something to a green screen and have no idea how it's going to look. You feel like you get a real sense of the film.
All of the color also in the film is done practically. It's not a grading trick.
When you have strange red worlds and there's yellow flares sort of dreamily coming in, that's all done by narrowly draping a crinkled camera gel over the lens, filming through there, and then people, either Brandon or one of our camera assistants, Ashley, with a flashlight with a yellow gel over it, flaring into the lens just in the corner of the lens, or flaring along the creases of the gel, so yellow will be sort of penetrating the red image. That's all done live.
The Red Room is a very stylized space, and so when he said this is all going to be photographed like this, it became very obvious that what I needed to do was to make myself a set of sunglasses that had the red gels on, so when we painted stuff we could wear these glasses and see them as the camera was going to see them.
The blood had to be green, and that's why the interior of the prosthetics looked like weirdo spinach, because actually photographed through red it would look more like blood. Whereas if you just colored everything red inside the prosthetics, it would disappear because the red on the gel above the lens would cancel out the red coloring.
Everything ends up looking very weird to the naked eye, but I was very pleased with how it all looked on camera.
It's such a relief to work with people who really, truly know what they want and have a vision, are flexible, of course, but have a world that they want to create, whatever that is. It can be very, very simple, or it can be very intricate. This one's very intricate.
I think it is old school in a way, and it's not for the sake of saving money on VF, you know, with which is it's very much intentional, which I like a lot.
When you get to set and You know, I'd never imagined the kitchen in our condo would be kind of entirely white, like the kind of inside of a spaceship or something. And, you know, all of the cars would be blue and vintage. And I didn't see that. So you turn up on set and there's these really cool things. And you kind of half notice them. And then I think only when we watch the film back will we think, oh, wow, this is like a whole world created that was kind of going on without us even really realizing.
It's a very strange, weird, beautiful world. I think it's a really nice challenge for an actor to not only play another character, but then play a character within a character.
Sometimes Chris is Colin and sometimes Chris is Voss, but is he really Voss or is he really Colin?
And the idea that from the meeting of two psyches should then manifest in something external, I wanted to feel what that felt like.
It's quite a fascinating battle that these two characters have in this brain.
Possessor, the first thing that kind of struck me about it is that sense of losing your identity slightly, not really knowing who you are, and this feeling of someone else inhabiting your body or you pretending to be someone else.
Much of the plot is the idea of Andrea Riseborough's character overtaking my body, hence overtaking a different identity. But the struggles that her character has throughout the film, in both dealing with her job and dealing with the real life, is kind of that struggle for identity, which I think is a universal struggle.
I think more than anything, that's what this film is about for me, is it possible to retain a sense of self, and what is that?
Possessor's pretty graphic from the violence perspective and everything, but it's not just to do it. There's a narrative reason for it, in how she is stepping away from her family life and more being programmed into this sort of killing machine that needs to effectively destroy this family unit for her to become what her boss wants her to fully become.
The initial idea from a writing perspective was something actually fairly personal. At a time when things were changing in my life very quickly and I was waking up feeling a sort of this sense of absence of familiarity, like I had to scramble to assemble some kind of identity that made sense in that context. And I think that's not a completely uncommon thing to varying degrees. I think a lot of people have those moments. One of the first scenes I conceived of was Voss in Colin's body, waking up next to someone and having to play this character in the context of a domestic setting. Even though the film's obviously a thriller and the main plot isn't about that, the seed of it really is about that. And to me, that moment of waking up and having to use cues that you find around you was the important scene. At the time I started writing it, the Edward Snowden stuff had just happened, and everyone was very much aware suddenly of the degree to which the governments are observing people and kind of spying on citizens. And so, in a way, part of this is like the ultimate invasion of privacy. It's someone in your life who actually is not a person in your life and is seeing and experiencing your most intimate moments as a total outsider.
It's a very specific world. It's very much of his brain.
Having seen Antiviral and reading the script, instantly I knew I wanted to do it. And that was the first thing I said to Brandon when we met, which was funny because it was like the beginning of the meeting and then we really had nothing to say after that. He didn't have to persuade me or anything.
For me, it was nice just to see how well he knew his own script, and obviously he would, but any question I had, there would be like a long history of detail about any small thing in the script.
I think with Brandon's work, what's really interesting is he explores the psychological through science fiction. And that's a really huge concept to even grapple with as a human being, but Brandon's really comfortable in that space.
I really wanted to cast Chris and Andrea just because they're fantastic actors, and it's not really more complicated than that. I think if you get two very interesting people together tackling the same character, you're going to get something fantastic.
I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting about it is that the character that we're portraying transcends gender. That's one of the things that really drew me to the script.
I'd written a very rough draft of it where Voss was a male character inhabiting another male character's body. But the two things I realized reading it were, first of all, that it was sort of boring to have it be a male character because there are too many stories about men who feel like they're smothered by their domestic life and want to detach from it. It seemed a little too obvious. And then there's just something inherently interesting about the idea of someone inhabiting the body of another gender who was way more appealing in that way.
I think one of the really fantastic things about Brandon's work and about him as a person is that he's written whole people, the type of power that Gerda can harness, the type of malleability that Voss has. Those qualities aren't defined by gender.
It's a really unusual thing for actors to do, to share a part like that and to try to weave in elements of both of those personalities.
It's funny because it's, I think, the first time, other than being at drama school and sharing roles in plays, because they were divvying them up, I think it's the first time that I've been in negotiation with another person about the same character.
For me, the actual character of Colin is almost nondescript because I would say 80% of when you see me in the movie, or even more, probably 90, 95%, he's not really Colin at all.
There was kind of a rabbit hole that we could go down in terms of who was going to play who.
It involves Chris and I talking a lot, and Brandon and Chris and I talking a lot, and Brandon and I talking a lot, and Brandon and Chris talking a lot.
Was it going to be Chris kind of observing Andrea and then playing her version of Voss, but then also she's, as a character, playing him and his version of Colin?
I watch him sometimes in scenes say like, okay, so hang on, I'm Voss being Colin, but she's pretending to be more, she's more Voss here, or she's more Colin, it kind of trying to work out where they are in that spectrum.
I think from a theoretical perspective, there was a fair bit of back and forth about who was kind of going to take the lead in a sense.
The little bits where you see Colin on his own is just to make it just distinct enough so you know that there's a bit of a difference, and to play with the idea of how good Andrea's character, Voss, is at her job, right? So I never want her to be be bumbling around. I think part of the fun is making the audience maybe forget that there's somebody inside this person, and then there will be a scene where they're reminded, like, oh right, that's her.
Chris is asking me what Voss might do, in a given situation. And so that's a dialogue that we've had that's really valuable.
There would be little things just that I would check in with her of like how she feels like she would do this.
Sometimes we figure it out in the moment. Sometimes Brandon has a really clear idea of what Voss would do, and Chris is there and I'm not there. Sometimes we're both there and we talk about it.
It makes it fun. It kind of makes it like a bit of a game to play with all that kind of stuff.
Just before we started shooting, we were discussing how frustrating it was we weren't going to actually get to work together more. And then it was, I think, the day after that I had my face in his crotch and my hand under his leg, to sort of achieve some sort of morphing shot. And it just became very clear very quickly that we were going to be working very closely together, to the point where we were playing the same body, the same person, not just the same psyche. We've had some moments of hysteria when he's been strangling me on a bed, or the times when you're not supposed to laugh.
For the most part, they were just on set when they were playing themselves, but there were a few things that we did. For instance, there's one shot where Voss is watching Colin in an apartment, and so that was done for real. We had 2 condos kind of in 2 separate buildings, and Andrea had an earpiece where she was actually listening to Chris do his scene and then imitating him.
We did a really cool shot where I'm essentially seeing my reflection, but it's her, and we were in this room, and it was kind of like there was 2 rooms next to each other, and they were both kind of double paneled glass, so there's multiple reflections going on at the same time. And so we've done kind of almost, what feels less like scenes in a movie and more like more like some kind of art performance that you would see in an exhibit, which has kind of been a fascinating thing to do.
On a really simple, basic day-to-day level, if Chris and I are playing the same scene as the 2 different individuals psychologically, then we get to actually be with each other right then. which is wonderful. And it's really nice to have somebody that we're both living and breathing next to one another, so it's a really authentic, imperfect rendition of the other person that you're seeing in front of you, but also it's your character's perception of them as well. There are so many levels sometimes that it's boggling. Sometimes it gets... Sometimes I say to Brandon, are we... who am I again? You know, there are just moments where ultimately Brandon is the, you know, maestro, and he has everything so finely tuned in his head, and everything has its own place to live, and he knows where it all lives. Sometimes you just need to go in there and just check exactly which room it's in, you know, before you sort of make any sweeping choices emotionally.
Dimmer.
Yeah, that's gonna work.
That's
better.
great.
It's always good to be working with someone who knows what they want.
The way he shoots is great for us as actors because he lets the scenes play out.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of freedom, you know, and the camera follows you, and you don't feel as though you're constricted in any way.
I come in, I have absolutely no idea what we're going to do, which is great and liberating. I mean, I've read something on a page, but I know that Brandon's brain is far bigger than anything that could confine him to a piece of white paper. But he's so clear about what he wants, and he's so expressive. So I feel really safe working with him, and safe kind of in the not knowing, you know, which is really fun when you can, I think when you can occupy that space as an actor, it's, well, it's rare, but it also leaves doors open for endless possibilities rather than having made so many decisions about what things are going to be before. We get to discover a lot on the day, which is really, really interesting.
I mean, I think filmmaking is very collaborative, and as much as, on the one hand, it's important as a director to have a vision and to keep things focused and have a kind of unified approach. At the same time, I think you're not doing your job if you're denying people the opportunity to experiment and to potentially offer up something that you didn't think of, or to really let them explore the film from their own perspective.
Anything we do has to be narratively motivated, and that all goes down to the photography as well. When we're what we call inside the machine, which is either when Voss is possessing someone, or we are from the point of view of Voss in the body of Colin, there's no handheld. It's all Steadicam or studio mode or static shots or things like this. And in terms of the opposite world, where Voss is Voss herself physically in an environment, it's all handheld. The handheld is specifically there to make it feel uneasy. It's not a good place. The movie is very beautiful and lush and happy when Voss is about to kill someone, when Voss is possessing someone, when things are going well there. When Voss is in a family environment with her ex-husband and son, that is when things are horrible. That is when things are unusual. That is when things are not right and very uncomfortable, and Voss is not where she should be. So contrary to what a person normally would expect, we tried to go in the opposite of it, just to make a movie where narratively the camera work reflects her psychological state.
Hi, darling. Hi, darling. Hi, darling. Hi, darling.
Brandon always has written Voss in all of the different drafts that we've had as an actor, which...
It's definitely a movie about acting, and as I was writing it, I realized that more and more, and kind of tweaked the dialogue to make it more obviously about acting. I remember Andrea at one point asked me if there was some sort of other profession that she could relate it to besides acting, and I think I said, sorry, it's kind of just acting. Like, acting is just, in a way, the perfect analogy, so you may be forced to draw from your own experiences.
Brandon and I have laughed about this for years now, but I'm playing a version of myself in the sense that I'm playing somebody who inhabits other people, attaches and detaches very quickly. It's almost, it's become chameleon-like in that way. There's a lot of emptiness when the detachment comes. For me, it's a place that I feel very familiar with psychologically.
She's an actor's actor, so even though I wish we had stuff to go do together, and maybe there'll be another movie that we can actually have scenes, proper scenes together, but it's fun in how unique this kind of dynamic is between me and her.
I knew that Brandon favoured practical very heavily, and I was told to read it to an eye to assume that everything was our department, that we were going to have to do everything, which was really exciting.
There are two things I really like about practical effects. The first is that I think they have a particular weight to them on screen. I'm not anti-CGI, but I think often if you lean too heavily on it and it's not rooted in something practical, it kind of feels floaty and unsatisfying in a way. And also there's a kind of tangible process with them. You know, when you do CGI effects, you sort of tell someone what you want and there's a bit of back and forth. But when you're working with practical effects and you're involved in a hands-on way, you kind of discover things by accident and through process that you wouldn't get to otherwise.
Basically every effect in Possessor is in camera. There's some CGI in the movie very capably done by the company Milk. Milk did, of course, the virtual office and some screen compilations, cleaning up some wires or things like that, or little blade extensions here and there. Everything else is live and done in camera.
So what we're going to do is, this vacuum form of Chris's face has been treated to be a rear projection screen. So we're going to project Andrea screaming into the back of it and rip a skin mask apart, revealing her screaming projected into the back of his face with a plate that we shot of an alleyway behind there. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Brandon always wanted very sort of stylized and representative ways of showing the experience of the Colin and Voz characters fighting for control of the body. This sort of like duality character.
The face ripping apart in the projection came from Dan because he'd wanted to try something like that. And that was part of what was so great about working with him, is that he has this kind of storeroom of ideas that he's always wanted to try. And he would say, well, I really want to do this and I think I can make it work. Do we have, the time to do it? And we would say, yes, that's fantastic. We've got to try it.
And then he took that idea and progressed it. So the mask that Chris wears when he's playing Colin as Voz, but represented as Colin back in control of, like, regaining control of the body. We made a version of that mask that could go onto the rear projection face and be torn away. Again, one of the several moments in the film where they're fighting for control of the body.
We always want to step it up and do something new with techniques or ways of photographing stuff. And Dan is really open to experimentation. So that's also another one of the cool things. He doesn't want to just do all of the tried and true, normal sort of manners of doing things. He'll think of how to step it up and how to innovate, which is how I like to approach photography as well.
Can they just rip it open?
Absolutely.
Full rip?
Yeah.
So same as what we've been doing, but don't stop. Just cut it open.
So we did a safe version, which was the dry version. Then we did the scripted version, which is a little trickier, but we know we've got something, so then we go on to the next one. And we got that after a little while as well. And then Brandon just came over and said, would it be okay if we try? And of course it's okay, that's why I'm here. So we then absolutely tear everything apart to get an alternate version.
I think often with a fake head or some sort of effect that Dan made, you'd be able to work within certain parameters without destroying the piece. And then afterwards he would say, okay, we're never going to use this again, right? Is it okay if I just stab it really hard with a poker and rip it to shreds? And often that would be the best stuff.
That's how you come across something that maybe you hadn't predicted the puppet could do or the makeup could do. I don't know which version of the eye removal will be in the film, but I was the one stabbing his eye out, and I think I did it 50 times. We got it on like the third time, but then that puppet is like a colander now. Like there are a lot of holes in it. So Sean sat for a live cast for us, and we did 2 separate live casts. One expressive, which we used to make a puppet of the character, and one passive that we sculpted prosthetics onto. So we had prosthetic versions of all of the wounds that he would suffer, and then we also made scars for the character for the aftermath. There were 2 different moments that were shot with that puppet. The first was the poker in the mouth, which knocks out his teeth. So we had removable teeth, which was an advance on a system I designed for the second Human Centipede film. So I got to sort of build on a teeth smashing gag that we did for that, make that a bit more robust. And then at the back of his throat, we had 2 lines, one for blood and one for air, so that we could have the puppet exhale through the blood. So you got this sort of like splashy breath during that scene. And then the second moment is the poker to the eye. So we made a soft eye that was attached via a silicone and fishing line optic nerve into the back of the head, very, very soft flesh around the eye. So we take a rigid poker and we literally just dislodge the eye. But there's a bloodline at the back, so as soon as the eye starts to shift from its housing, blood is able to come around it and sort of pour out of the head. At the time it felt excessive, but with hindsight it was one of our more restrained blood gags. I think we got through about 2.5-3 gallons of blood. We went really, really over the top with how horrible that scene is, and depending on the censorship board in the country of the viewer of this, you may have seen some of the most extreme stuff, I think. We only made one of those puppets and it stood up to quite the beating. You know, on a film of this size, you can either aim for a high shooting ratio of a few gags, or you can go pedal to the metal and just be determined to get everything with one version of everything. Some things we've done multiples of. The wax melts, we've got a couple of different versions of Voz's head to melt for that. We've made thin, like hollow shell wax versions of the actors' heads, painted them all up, and we're literally just going to subject them to insane heats so they slowly break down on camera. Again, we did a load of tests, playing around with different heat locations, different orientations and so on, and we're going to show one of them melting away to nothing, and then the other one, the footage is reversed, so you see it rebuilding as that character.
Our final day of shooting, the last thing we did was we melted all the heads, so it was a big weird way to end it. I know you can't, with your face, do a pain reaction, but just sort of a bit more body pain reaction and search around a bit longer for the shot.
With the stab or with the pull apart?
The pull apart.
Okay.
The actors have been very accommodating to some of the things we put them through. You know, we try to have an eye on comfort, and obviously we're never going to endanger anyone, but at the end of the day, our main thing is to make it look amazing, and they've been very good about putting up with some of the things we've sort of stuck to them or wedged them into. Rossif Sutherland had to have his right arm tucked behind him for several days of shooting after he lost part of his right hand. And so we made a shoulder rig, an arm rig, that allowed us to puppeteer a fake arm on his body, and then a removable forearm section so we could put different versions of the arm on for different moments in that scene. So this was a version of the hand that was cast holding the gun, and this, I don't have it with me, but this had the other 2 fingers there that could be pulled away on a ripcord. But obviously he couldn't lie there with his hand in this position once the gun's been taken from him. So we also made this version, which was the passive version that he wears for the rest of the scene. We were sort of dressing a big space over 2 days, but also we don't always have the luxury of shooting chronologically, so we do have to clear away huge amounts of, I mean, we don't. The poor people of Set Deck do, but you know, with nary a complaint. And then we have to dress it all back in again, so down goes another, you know, half gallon just to put the same pool back on the floor. Over the 2 days that fight took place, I think we ended up using about maybe 8-9 gallons of blood in total across those 2 days. There were geysers of blood on that one. That was quite excessive. Every time we get anything on camera, it's been very gratifying. We've done a lot of stuff with this amazing, like super tight macro lens, the probe that Kareem brought on, which is a sort of a world class. Like it's the only lens like it in the world, and it's a very recent addition to any camera department. The lens hasn't been around for very long. And so we've been getting in closer to puppets on this than I've ever thought we were going to. And it was very nice, mostly very nice, to hear Brandon and Rob and Kareem say, we were genuinely unsure as to whether we would get away with shooting stuff this close, but it looks beautiful. It looks amazing. We didn't know if that was even going to be possible. So we're getting into like the scalps of puppets to the extent that on a cinema screen there's going to be like 2 feet between individual hairs on the scalp of these things. It's so close. But yeah, it's really, really nice to see that stuff come to light.
Okay, get that blood going. Blood town.
Better than we don't clean it uptown, right, Rob?
Yes, we don't clean it uptown.
You don't want to go to You Don't Clean It Uptown.
I mean, do you want to go to Bloodtown as well, really? Especially since they're neighbors? Right. All right.
There's a lot of like-minded people. We all like the same films. We grew up on the same films.
There are a lot of genre nerds on set. In particular, I mean, Dan, in a really extreme way, is, and also Kareem Hussein, is an encyclopedia of genre knowledge. So getting those two guys in a room is hilarious and informative.
In working with other longtime cult film or genre fans, it is literally like working with family. You cut through automatically a lot of the explanation process you would have to give to other people in terms of your film references and also your technique references, where you could say, okay, so in this movie, this was done using this technique. How do we step it up? How do we do something new based on what has been done before?
We can say, you know, do you want it like this or like this, and name 2 films, and you can get an answer that tells you exactly what Brandon wants or exactly what's expected. So, like, for example, when we stab Elio in close-up, we go back in a sort of a dream sequence. We had our level, the top being Lone Wolf and Cub for the blood spray, or like, you know, Lady Slowblood, and then there was something much more reserved, like I'm not going to say what we said because it's not a film reference, it's just offensive, but the gauge of blood flow could be spoken of in cinematic terms, which was really gratifying. When you hear the cut and everyone can relax, and that's when everyone's like, you hear Video Village erupt with like pleasure, like excited noises. That's the best bit, really.
Vase. Please lift your right arm. Left arm. Try your hands. Motor cortex is showing full sync. Vocal check.
1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Very good. Very good.
I'm in place.
Good. Tonight I want you to get in a fight with Parse. Get yourself thrown out. Something public. Understood?
You lost?
I'm Reed. I trust we haven't met.
No, Mr. Parse. But I really should get back to the party. It's best if we don't talk.
No, I insist that we talk. I insist. As your employer, I insist. I just find this all so absolutely fascinating. Do you really feel what he feels? Are you really here with me?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Must be fun for you to have a cock to play with, huh? Will you fuck my sister before you kill her?
I should go.
Stay. What happens when he leaves the body? What happens if he gets control?
We'll make sure that doesn't happen.
What if he does?
His brain will retrofit motives. He'll remember doing all this on his own free will, the host's brain assuming its own volition. Also why I should leave. We're creating dangerous memories right now.
But then, how do I know you've never been in my head then? Oh, God. I just hope you won't judge me too harshly when this is all over.
It's not my place to judge.
Good. Welcome to the family.
For anxiety.
That's it. Just relax. Don't worry. Your ear is nice and numb. You are going to feel a slight pressure. There you go. Very good. Nice and still. You are doing so well.
Tasia, you have a message from Michael. Would you like me to read it to you?
Not right now.
All right.
Doctor, I'd like to talk.
Of course, Tasia. What would you like to talk about?
My work.
Go on.
I had another episode, if that's what you want to call it. Just like the Solomon job.
Go on.
In the hotel there was a fountain and the water... The feeling during interface is a distance from the host, like I'm not sure whether I'm in control or whether I'm observing their behaviour. And now sometimes I feel it outside of the machine. Like I look at my hands and I can't locate the point of ownership. Or I watch my fingers move and I'm not sure whether I'm really causing the motion. Or maybe the motion comes first and then the sensation that I caused it, or there isn't even that sometimes. Gerda's beginning to suspect I'm of two minds. Or becoming that way. Maybe she's right. I'm losing focus. I almost lost control of the host. I'm worried that maybe I should just take some time off, you know? I keep saying I'm gonna take time off. Look at me, I'm a monster. You're a doctor, do you think I'm human?
You have another message from Michael. Would you like me to read it to you?
Yeah.
Would you like me to start with the first message?
Yeah.